On the 1st of October 1949, China turns the page on its past. After long years of revolutionary struggle, Mao Zedong is to become the country's head of state. In the capital, everyone fervently awaits the proclamation. On coming to power, Mao has one sole objective, one sole idea, one sole passion: to restore to China its legendary power, to bring back its lost glory. The Middle Kingdom, as China is known, has a message to the world. This is modern China's Year Zero. China has woken up, but it's not time for celebration yet. Mao's army has yet to show much spirit. The civil war that has ravaged the country for 20 years now is still not won. Many regions are still in the hands of the nationalists and their leader, Chiang Kai-shek. On the road to Sichuan, a certain Deng Xiaoping, first secretary of the Department of the Southwest, is ready to take up arms again. Deng Xiaoping has been close to Mao from the start. He shares Mao's dream, and Mao, in turn, trusts him completely. He's just a low-ranking administrator without much influence, but his destiny will be to transform China more thoroughly even than his mentor. For now, though, his mission is to seize the cities where the last enemy troops are entrenched and massacre them with no pity. For years now, the militant communists have been the target of terrible violence. The adversary shows no mercy and hunts them down in cold blood. But in vain, because Mao's soldiers never give up, and they always prevail. Vanquished, Chiang Kai-shek seeks refuge on the island of Taiwan, along with 2 million of his fighters. For Deng Xiaoping and his party comrades, it's a total victory. By the spring of 1950, continental China is in Mao's hands. Within days, he has eradicated its past. Everything that recalls the old regime is systematically destroyed. For 450 million Chinese, a new era has begun, full of hope and renewal. But it won't be that easy. For this immense China that Mao has inherited is miserable, archaic, and under-equipped. Hardly any factories, no bridges, no paved roads. The peasants, who make up 95% of the population, farm the land with tools from another age. They're shamelessly exploited, reduced to the state of beasts of burden, and they have no rights. To gain their support, Mao has promised them land. And he keeps his word. Immediately, the finger is pointed. The landowners are all now at the mercy of the people. A propaganda film shows how to treat them, from trial to execution. The executions are carried out by the villagers themselves at Mao's demand. The peasants must always be implicated with their own bare hands if they are to be linked to the new revolutionary order. The confiscated lands and property are divided up fairly, and each family gets its share under the eye of the local party representative. Away from the cameras, the faithful Deng Xiaoping is supervising hundreds of confiscations, with no scruples. As a result of his land reforms, Mao Zedong seals a lasting alliance with the peasants. And the Communist Party pulls out all the stops to make it work. As Mao declares, we communists are like the seeds and the people are the soil. Wherever we go, we must unite with the people, take root and flower. In no time at all, there are 19 million militants all over the countryside, an area as vast as the whole United States. Every village, every town, every housing block is on side. All the networks are in place to spread the word and implement it. Because Mao wants to make China great again in his own way, and with a firm hand. He starts off by isolating it from the rest of the world. Like all his countrymen, Mao has been profoundly humiliated by a century of foreign occupation. Since the middle of the 19th century, China was living under a concession regime imposed by the Westerners who dismembered it. Europeans and Americans helped themselves to its wealth. They robbed, despised, and corrupted the Chinese. Only a handful of Chinese managed to make a profit out of it all. The ancient Middle Kingdom wants its revenge. From now on, Mao intends to protect his country from plundering, indeed from all exterior influence. He dreams of self-sufficiency. China closes its gates. Foreign residents begin to panic. Businessmen, officials, missionaries, they're all packing their bags. Every single one of them will leave China in haste. They won't be back in a hurry. To the West, it's an affront. In reprisal, they refuse to recognize the new regime and give their support to Chiang Kai-shek. From now on, it's Taiwan, with its 3 million inhabitants, that represents China at the UN. The country with the biggest population in the world gets the cold shoulder. Mao is virtually on his own and in sore need of allies. He's having trouble being self-sufficient. For the first time in his life, he leaves his homeland for 2 long months. For the occasion, he swaps his eternal cap for a fur hat. Hardly has he arrived than he pronounces the words that will gain the trust of the Soviets. In reality, all his praise masks a profound resentment. Mao mistrusts Stalin, who didn't support him during the Civil War. Above all, it hurts his pride to rely on the USSR. He was determined to transform China on his own, so this is a bitter pill to swallow. On the 14th of February 1950, a mutual aid treaty is finally signed. The die is cast. The new China can at last get off the ground, but by ways and means that now have to meet Moscow's approval. Straight away, thousands of advisors, engineers, and experts pour across the border to help Peking launch its first 5-year plan. At the heart of the project is heavy industry. 100 gigantic factories. The chosen sectors are steel, metal, and mining. China is modernizing. In the countryside, collectivism is steaming ahead. The land that was redistributed a few months ago is requisitioned and pooled. Family smallholdings are a thing of the past. Now it's all a big state co-op. Nearly 400 million Chinese peasants have now become employees of the state. And it's Mao, himself a former peasant, who's their boss. The Chinese economy is being transformed. For Deng Xiaoping, who is running things in the south of the country, his mentor's promises have all been honored there. By 1952, his zeal has won him promotion in Peking. He's climbing the ranks now, getting ever nearer to power, and he ends up in the party's political bureau. Now he's a part of the big decisions, and under the daily supervision of the great leader himself. At first sight, they couldn't be more different, starting with their height. Mao is a giant, over 6 feet tall, while his disciple is only 4'11". Mao is a poet in his spare time, with a versatile if unruly mind. Deng, a level-headed workaholic who loves figures and files. But they make quite a team. Mao appreciates Deng's flexibility, his vivacity, and in return, Deng's devotion to his idol is without limit. To his eyes, Mao is the great helmsman who's steering China to prosperity and glory. And now Mao launches another great project. For 3,000 years, education in China has been a privilege of the elite. A tiny handful of mandarins have ruled over the illiterate masses. Mao now decrees that a major power must have a people that is educated. Suddenly, the youth of China is all whisked off to school. For the Middle Kingdom, it's like a radical, almost genetic form of evolution. Riding high now on his first reforms, the great leader proclaims that by 2001 and the beginning of the 21st century, China will have become a great industrialized socialist country. In 1956, his authority is at its peak. Challenged at first by various comrades, he has now become unassailable. Head of state, leader of the party, president of the military commission, his power is unlimited and his word is law. Mao has millions of men and women at his command to carry out the titanic works that would bring China such glory. So they build colossal dams and vast reservoirs and dig canals everywhere. The first bridge over the Yangtze is the pride of the nation. In the 4,000 years of its history, never has China undertaken such a huge project. The people were enthusiastic before, now they're ecstatic. Mao is beside himself, but he's losing all sense of proportion. And all this mass adulation is hiding a stark reality. China is living under a reign of terror. Any dissidents, real or imagined, are being interned in work camps where, consigned to slavery, they're being brainwashed to break their spirit of opposition. From Xinjiang to Canton, from Jilin to Shanghai, the land is dotted with more than 1,000 Laogai labor camps. Under Mao's reign, 50 million Chinese will pass through them. And to this sword of Damocles that hangs over anyone even tempted to disagree are added sporadic swoops to clamp down on any dissidents. In 1957, when sparrows are accused of eating the crops, Mao commands, "Make them fly till they drop," and his people all obey. But the great leader has overlooked one detail. With no predators, the insects multiply and proliferate all the more. The following year, the harvests are devastated. The party don't mind filming this terrible carnage, but the cameras aren't rolling when the millions of Chinese accused of being anti-revolutionary are persecuted, imprisoned, deported, and massacred like dumb animals during the 5 murderous campaigns that take place between 1950 and 1960. Deng Xiaoping, once admitted into the machine of power, has become an enthusiastic cog in it. On the 4th of October 1957, Mao is staggered to learn of the first satellite now orbiting the Earth, a technological achievement the Soviets are very proud of. Naturally, Sputnik is the star of the October Revolution celebrations in Moscow. The Chinese president is there at the party. Stalin's successor has saved him a place of honor at his side. Deng Xiaoping's there too, having a great time. Mao, though, seems more reserved. And with reason. There are no portraits of Stalin on this parade. Khrushchev has forbidden them since he denounced the dictator and all his crimes. Mao takes umbrage. If Stalin's being hung out to dry, he could well be next. And as for the Soviet Union's successes, they're just unbearable. They just underline China's weaknesses and her reliance on the Kremlin. But suddenly, the great helmsman has a crazy idea: to overtake the Russians in every field without their help. When Mao announces this about turn to his closest partner, Deng Xiaoping is the first to know. And he has his doubts. Their country is only just out of the Middle Ages. It's in no position to break with Moscow. But Mao is stubborn. China may lack capital and technology, but she does have one inexhaustible reserve: millions of hands. In the spring of 1958, the Red Emperor launches an unprecedentedly huge campaign to pursue his obsession: the Great Leap Forward. Almost overnight, the Chinese masses are militarized. The peasants are all assigned to work brigades grouped together by commune. They work away at a frantic pace, driven ever onwards by the party. Their commune is responsible for every individual, from cradle to grave. Family meals are forbidden. They all have to eat every meal at the canteen, whether they like it or not. Mao intends, within 5 years, to produce twice as much steel as the United Kingdom. The Chinese are ordered to hand over all their old scrap iron: basins, tools, scissors, anything. To melt it all down, Mao tells them to use the village blacksmiths' forges and to build new ones too. All over China, improvised blast furnaces spring up, with local party members harassing the villagers to meet their quotas. The peasants work day and night, but they neglect their fields. No seed gets sown. And it's all a waste. The steel produced is of such poor quality that it's virtually unusable. So then, of course, the harvest is looking very bad. Food shortages loom, and many of the leaders are deeply worried. One man stands up against Chairman Mao's policy. Peng Dehuai, the Minister of Defense, warns him of dark days ahead. And he pays the price. Mao can't stand criticism and flies into a fury. Better read than expert, he rages. A stunned political bureau stands behind him. Peng Dehuai is politically liquidated. Deng Xiaoping isn't there that day, so doesn't take part in his lynching, but he bites his tongue all the same and falls into line with his comrades. He will regret it all his life. And the great leap forward continues. As predicted, the harvest of 1959 is a disaster. For the next 2 years, the country, already weakened and disorganized, suffers the whims of the weather. By the summer of 1961, famine rules, real famine. It kills between 15 and 35 million Chinese in tragic isolation. For China has raised an impenetrable barrier around herself, and the regime has imposed a media blackout. It will take 20 years for the sad truth to emerge. It seems the red star of Mao has faded. Here at the beginning of the 60s, China is at death's door. All the expected power and glory was just wishful thinking. The great man has failed. The idol had feet of clay. Mao, challenged by his peers, agrees to recognize his mistakes for the one and only time in his life. On the outside, nothing has changed. The great helmsman is still at the tiller, and his comrades still sing his praises. But behind the scenes, Deng Xiaoping is less enthused. Mao worries him. He has become unpredictable. Like his comrades in the party, he'd rather bet on Liu Shaoqi, a more reasonable man. Mao pretends to go along with it. He gives up the presidency of the Republic to the man who's getting all the votes. It's a fake retirement that doesn't fool anyone, for he retains the real power, the presidency of the party. Deng Xiaoping remains cautious. He knows they haven't heard the last of Mao. So now it's Liu Shaoqi who receives all the foreign delegations, along with Deng Xiaoping. The two of them do their best to heal the wounds of a traumatized country. The Great Leap is forgotten. For 3 years, the Chinese pause for breath. Deng loosens the straitjacket. He allows the peasants to farm their individual plots, and the harvests prosper. He gives permission for open marketplaces, and supply increases. Daily life is getting back some of the sweetness it's been so lacking. On Sundays, the Chinese can even take a little stroll with their family. And they're flocking to the bookstores because now they can read. Deng is a pragmatist. One day, he declares to the political bureau, Who cares if a cat is black or white as long as it can catch mice? In other words, unlike Mao, he'd rather be expert than red. Meanwhile, though, the former president hasn't given up on political life. On the contrary, he's been traveling all over the country in his private train. In those towns that were spared all the disasters of the Great Leap, his popularity with the young is still intact. By handing stewardship over to Liu and Deng, he has become a kind of sphinx whose words are scripture. Since the failure of the Great Leap, he has temporarily stopped promising power to the Chinese. He has another obsession now, that Peking should supplant Moscow in the hearts and minds of all the revolutionaries of the world. And to do that, he has a plan. On the 16th of July, 1966, Mao makes his reappearance. For more than 2 hours, he swims serenely in the Yangtze, the Blue River, surrounded by young people. The great helmsman is sending a message to the Chinese youth. He's saying that he's counting on them to carry on the fight against those who've abandoned their ideals. The great cultural and proletarian revolution has begun. Unquestioningly, students and school children all enroll in their millions in a new organization, the Red Guard. Mao will turn it into a weapon of mass destruction. He provides all the admiring crowds with a little book that gathers together his greatest quotes. The Little Red Book becomes the Bible of the Red Guard. Mao flatters them. He craftily points out a target for their retribution, the Chinese Communist Party, riddled with traitors who want to bring back capitalism. Unmask them. Mao mentions no names, but his slogan, "Bombard the headquarters," is an invitation to strike at the head. The fanatical Red Guard obeys. The communist leaders, both great and small, are at their mercy. Thousands of them are arrested, beaten, tortured, and humiliated in stadiums that shake with the roars of the vengeful crowd. The country's two most important leaders fall immediately. Liu Shaoqi, the president of the republic, will die of his ill treatment. Deng's fate is less cruel. He is exiled to a remote area where he works repairing tractors. On the posters denouncing the renegade pair, that famous cat that Deng imprudently spoke of reappears. Mao's not one to forgive and forget. The pragmatists, the realists, the half-hearted had better watch out. The whole of China is gripped by convulsions and trouble that Mao just encourages. It's chaos that will be his way back to power. Elsewhere in the world, these images of the guru surrounded by ecstatic crowds make a pop icon of him. When the French press interviews some students, they turn out to be big fans.
Nous avons une confiance très profonde, absolue, un autre parti et le président Mao.
Vous ne pensez pas qu'il pourrait se tromper, par exemple?
Non, jamais, jamais. Ils sont toujours, le parti et le président Mao sont toujours très corrects, justes. Jamais.
Seven years later, and the Cultural Revolution has run its course. There at his tractor factory, Deng Xiaoping witnesses appalled the ravages caused by Mao's vanity. Maoist orthodoxy has become the norm and rules over every moment of Chinese people's lives. The thoughts of Chairman Mao are omnipresent. They're there at every crossroads, in every park, every station, every factory. It's the triumph of the closed mind. And yet the rare Western visitors permitted to set foot in China, most of them sympathizers, are ecstatic. Our Chinese comrades have at last achieved the promises of communism, they say. Complete equality of the classes, of income and of the sexes is a reality. They're charmed by the frugality of the Chinese, by the absence of any advertisements in the streets. For them, China is a model for the revolution. In reality, though, behind the optimistic facade, China is in total chaos. By purging the party, Mao has destroyed the backbone of the country. For Deng, it's a catastrophe. China has lost all the management class that was dragging it towards progress. The new leaders, chosen for their devotion to the Little Red Book, are often the most incompetent. The factories are running slow, and production is anemic. Above all, China is dumbing down. The universities have been closed for 3 years. The 12 million students who've joined the Red Guard have been dispatched to the country. Once they'd put Mao back on his throne, they became too dangerous. Mao has always distrusted intellectuals, the educated and experts, so he'd rather get rid of them. Out at the far-flung borders of China, millions of educated young people languish in isolation, poverty, and endless boredom. In the cities, too, people have become apathetic. The earlier euphoria has given way to resignation. Despite all their efforts, the greatness and influence they'd so hoped to gain are receding day by day. Shut away behind its wall, China stagnates. Repression is worse than ever. During the Cultural Revolution, 100 million Chinese were persecuted and around 3 million of them died. But try as the powers that be may to hunt down counter-revolutionaries, the country is at a standstill. In 1973, Deng Xiaoping returns to the spotlight. In spite of their differences, Mao decides to call him back. On his return to Peking, the little man finds Mao looking much older. He has trouble speaking. and hardly ever goes out. He's still both lucid and powerful, though. Like a good soldier, Deng silences the critics of all the excesses committed during his years in purgatory. His job now is to get the country out of the slump it's in, while still pretending everything's wonderful. So China embarks upon a diplomatic revolution. In spite of the war in Vietnam, which Americans have long blamed it for, it reaches out to the United States. In 1974, Deng visits France, where he once stayed when he was young. Then he goes straight on to New York and the UN General Assembly. It's only now that Mao's China takes the seat there that Taiwan has been keeping warm since 1949. His trip allows him to make a lot of new friends.
Mr. Vice Premier, how do you feel about this current General Assembly session?
Deng's intention is to open China up to technology and to foreign capital. He has broken free of all ideological moorings. The thoughts of Chairman Mao no longer inspire him. Now he's more impressed by Singapore. In a single generation, the Southwest Asian city-state has gone from underdevelopment to the status of an economic giant, while remaining a dictatorship. As a model, it offers Deng a glimpse of prosperity for his country. But the most radical members of his regime, led by Mao's wife, have an eye on him. They suspect him of revisionism and never miss a chance to report what he's up to the chairman. Mao lectures him. You talk too much about quality of life, not enough about class warfare. Disgrace is looming. It arrives in April 1976. On his deathbed, Mao dismisses Deng as a domestic. It's their last meeting. On the 9th of September 1976, the great helmsman dies. The radio plays the appropriate music on a loop, interrupted only by regular mentions by the authorities of the name Deng Xiaoping. Accused of wanting to squander the legacy of Mao, Deng is torn between sadness and resentment. His one-time mentor did not keep his promises. China remains an underdeveloped country, an industrial, cultural, and technological lightweight. Its power and influence, nothing but a pipe dream. And despite all the propaganda, Mao hasn't even given a bowl of rice to his people. Many still remain hungry. Deng is biding his time to give China a real momentum at last. They need him, so once his enemies have fallen, he's back in government. In 1977, he starts getting the party back into shape. All the leaders banished by the Cultural Revolution are brought back home. With their support, Deng redoubles his efforts. And by the end of '78, things are really getting going. In the space of just a few weeks, the China that Mao held prisoner for 30 years is at last opening up. To their amazement, the Chinese soon discover all the treats they've been missing. An air of freedom is blowing through the whole country. China is breaking loose. Little by little, plenty is replacing all the frugality. The goods for export aren't quite up to scratch at first. But it's just a start. Soon, the groundswell of liberalization initiated by Deng is energizing everyone. The young people, who till now have been sorely tried, can express themselves at last.
Maintenant, nous croyons à l'efficacité. Autrefois, nous étudions la politique, mais nous n'avons pas appris beaucoup de choses, en effet.
Vous êtes content de l'ouverture de votre pays?
Bien sûr, nous sommes très contents. Surtout pour nous, nous sommes les étudiants qui apprennent la langue étrangère, n'est-ce pas?
Est-ce qu'on aurait pu avoir une discussion comme ça il y a 2 ans?
À ce moment-là,
non, c'est impossible. Maintenant, nous avons plus de liberté de parler tout ce que nous pensons, n'est-ce pas?
c'est ça. En disant c'est impossible.
Il y a 2 ans, c'est impossible.
C'est impossible.
The peasants are leaving collectivism behind. They're encouraged to make money, innovate and export. And so China can truly become an economic power. Deng once and for all rejects the idea that she should rely only on herself. And he happily embraces the changes. The new head of state, the one they're calling the Little Helmsman, goes to America. Deng presents China to them as a promised land, 1 billion low-cost workers, all keen to train in modern techniques and with a thirst to consume. Uncle Sam is very interested.
Kind of.
China's apprenticeship begins in 1979. The country has no experience in business, so Deng allows the first mixed capital companies to be established, where the Chinese will learn all the ins and outs of international trade. Many are afraid to offer China up to foreign greed, but Deng replies, "When you open the window, you let in air as well as mosquitoes." Ten years later, Deng Xiaoping's China has far outstripped Mao's. In 1989, Mao's portrait still looks out over Tiananmen Square, but it doesn't impress the thousands of students on a sit-in there for democracy. The foreign press is lapping it up. For the first time since 1949, opposition to the regime has gone public. It's the price Deng must pay for the controlled opening up he wanted, for he has kept his promises. Within a decade, China has been transformed. A stone's throw from Tiananmen Square, the stock exchange is booming. To keep China's first millionaires happy, the first sumptuous and somewhat tasteless palaces are shooting up. Red China has hit it rich. Its middle class is constantly growing, and goods made in China are conquering the world. China is gradually becoming the workshop of the world. Millions of peasants are leaving the countryside to try their luck in town, in the hope of giving their children back in the villages a better life. Traditional Chinese society is on the way out. The Chinese Communist Party is changing too. The comrades are happily trading in their Mao collars for Armani suits, while still hanging on to their positions as leaders. They support Deng Xiaoping when he decides to send in the tanks to literally crush the demonstrators in Tiananmen Square.
We make friends. Excuse me. China will no future. It is a black future for China.
While Mao hid his crimes, Deng flaunts them, even if it means disapproving glances from the West. He has brought China out of isolation, but he still wants the party in charge. That paradox will be his heritage. Deng Xiaoping died in 1997, but it is that heritage that China has built on, and beyond his wildest dreams. By opening up the country, Deng unleashed the prodigious energy that swept away the ideals and ethics of Mao. Today, China exports every 6 hours the same volume of goods as it did in the whole year of 1978. It is currently the go-to place for cutting-edge technological research. Never in history has one nation known such huge growth in the space of 3 decades. And the Chinese themselves have done well out of it. The pleasures and vices of consumer society hold no mystery for them now. As China has become both banker and financier to the world, though, it's still Mao's face that stares out from its banknotes. His portrait still dominates Tiananmen Square, but the party leaders of today rarely evoke his memory. The phrase socialist market economy has now entered the Constitution. But China has become a capitalist power, and one that now has a lot of influence. This paradox we owe entirely to Deng Xiaoping. Mao swore he'd hoist China into the ranks of the great world powers, but Deng was the one who kept that promise.